introduce our guest.
It is my pleasure. So, Ross Blocher was born into a family of evangelical Christians and spent a good amount of time in churches of various denominations, singing in choirs, serving as an acolyte. I don't even know what that word is, and memorizing lots of scripture, which gave him good practice for memorizing an inhuman number of the digits of pi. Meanwhile, he busied himself reading books about ghosts, vampires, aliens, and chupacabras. In college, while serving as president of a Bible study group, yes, he did, he started attending skeptical lectures and reading science books, coming to the conclusion that he'd been wrong about reality his whole life. While the beliefs went away, his interest in them didn't. And Ross has spent the time since trying to find out why people believe the crazy things they do and participating in the independent investigations group of CFI, which investigates claims of the paranormal with a scientific viewpoint, and currently has a prize of $500,000 US for anyone with any paranormal ability that can prove it. Ross is an accomplished animation professional working at Disney. He has worked on numerous award-winning films, including The Princess and the Frog and The Simpsons movie, just to name a few. And the latest film he has a credit on is the just-released Wish. Can't wait to see that one. You can learn more about Ross at rossblocher.com, a very simple website. Going into the chat. Since early 2011, it's been a long time, Ross has co-hosted a skeptically themed weekly podcast called Oh No, Ross and Carrie. And this is some information about this show from Wikipedia, straight from the Wikipedia page. Oh No, Ross and Carrie is an investigative journalism podcast produced in Los Angeles and distributed by the Maximum Fun Network. The hosts personally investigate claims about spirituality, fringe science, religion, and the paranormal, and then discuss their findings on the show. The motto of the podcast is, "We show up so you don't have to." And funding for the show's investigations comes from listener donations. I believe we're going to put the wiki link for the podcast in. And actually, now I am going to play for you a special intro for the podcast that happens to be pertinent to today's talk. Let's see how this goes.
Oh, Russ, hey.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad I found you in line.
These clouds are really freaking me out.
I hate having to stand in line, and boy, what a line.
These giraffes do not smell good.
No, they do not, and they have such short necks.
But I'm hearing we need to get on this ark.
We gotta get on the ark. It
Yeah.
is about to rain. God is about to destroy humanity. Hey, oh, sorry. Are you Noah?
Yeah, I know we look like humans, but we're actually
Yes,
we're
totally.
podcasters.
We are podcasters, so it's different.
Have you heard of Oh No, Ross and Carrie?
We investigate spirituality, claims of the paranormal, stuff like that.
And you have a boat and say the world's going to end, so seemed like something for us to check out.
We would love to be on the boat.
We came 2 by 2.
What do you think?
Oh No, Ross and Carrie, available on MaximumFun.org.
I love it.
I love
I
it.
would show up for that.
And so without further ado, here is Ross Blocher. Welcome, Ross. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me here. You are my folks. As you said in the intro, I myself am recovering from religion. I was raised, as 3/4 of you were, believing in a literal Noah's Ark and Noah, and that story is part of our Earth's history. With the podcast, Carrie and I find ourselves in all kinds of really absurd positions and situations, some of them very awkward, some of them very exhausting or uncomfortable. And this just seemed like a fun one to share because we have done this 12-part series on Oh No, Ross and Carrie about our visit to the Ark. Or I should say my visit to the Ark. So Carrie was not able to join me because she was on her honeymoon. How selfish. And I'll tell a little bit about kind of what was the inciting incident for that.
Priorities, Carrie, priorities.
Right. Yeah. Get them straight. Funny enough, on her honeymoon, she went to the Galapagos Islands. So we had very different experiences over that week. But anyway, so there are many other fun investigations that we've done that I would gladly talk about. But this seemed like a fun one because I recently had put together a presentation of images showing what the Ark looks like. Because every day, whenever I had a spare moment for the real reason I'd attended this place, every time I had a spare minute, I would go run into the Ark and I'd photograph every single sign and exhibit. So what you're about to see is a massive culling down from like 2,000 images that I took. So yeah,
So why were you in that area?
um, well, because of an event, a special event that was happening at the Answers in Genesis facility where the Ark is. So I wasn't there just to see the Ark. Well, I guess it's time to get into the presentation. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to share my screen here and start the presentation. So here's me in front of the Ark. And of course, I am far in the foreground. This thing is massive. It's 510 feet long, wide, whatever the longest dimension you want to call that is. And I have my scale model here that I bought from the gift shop. And yes, one of the dangers of doing a podcast like this is that we do give money to things like this, but as we say on the podcast, we show up so you don't have to. So in this sense, I'm giving you the vicarious experience so you can see what it's like to attend the Ark without having to give them some of your money. So we'll talk about different aspects of this as we go along, but I'm looking forward to the Q&A because there's so much more to cover that I didn't include here. I will just recommend, again, there is a 12-part series where we talk about every aspect of this visit, including, and this is the reason why I attended, there was a homeschooling conference happening at the Ark. And Carrie and I saw that advertised and we said, oh my goodness, this is right up our alley. We wanted to go to the Ark anyway, but now they're going to have Kirk Cameron there. And of course, Ken Ham. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. He is the progenitor of Answers in Genesis, the group, the company that created the Ark and also the Creation Museum in Kentucky. And other various featured speakers. But we thought, well, how prime would that be to go visit and learn homeschooling methods from people who use homeschooling as a way to protect their children from learning objective facts about the world. There are responsible ways to do homeschooling. This is not it. Anyway, so we wanted to go attend that, but then also see the Ark. And as I told you, Carrie had her honeymoon happening at the same time. And unfortunately, they sold out. So they had 3 original dates for this conference, and those sold out very quickly. And we were, somewhat crestfallen and in communication by email. And they opened up 3 new dates. And I excitedly signed up right away and said, Carrie, let's buy our tickets. And she said, well, I could have made the old days work after my honeymoon. I couldn't make the first one. So that's why I voyaged off alone to the Building Strong Foundations, a Family Homeschool Experience. Oh, and one of the reasons why I haven't shown all the images before is because we produce a podcast. And as you just reminded me, we are funneling this back into podcast form. Many people may be listening to this. So I'll do my best to be descriptive of the images as we go through. So this particular one is just the sign-up sheet for this Answers in Genesis Homeschool Conference. This was May 12th through 14th of 2022. And this is my collection of just material that they sent me. So after I signed up, I got sent the welcome letter, the wristband to wear, my parking pass, the free tote bag, all of that fun stuff, and the events that I had signed up for. And this was another area of concern for me because the events sold out very quickly. Sold out. Once you've signed up, you then say, I want to go to this talk on biblical archaeology. I want to go to this talk that's a tour of the Ark. And I didn't get a lot of my first choices. And thankfully, I was able to, bit by bit, as I was there, get my way into some other talks. But you'll see, for example, I signed up for the Busy Mom's Guide to Romance. That should be fun for me. All right. So at the time, when I got there, there was really only one hotel nearby, and it was right next door. Since then, they've opened up these new Hampton Inns and Suites, like a location that's on the campus. But I got the America's Best Value Inn next door. And even just wandering into the lobby of that tiny hotel, they had a listing of all of the churches in Williamstown, and you can see they've got Baptist, they've got Catholic, they've got Christian. What does that mean? And they've got Methodist. Those are your church options.
Wow,
So
they're therefore saying Baptist, Catholic, and Methodist are not Christian. That's really interesting.
right, yeah. What does that imply?
See, I thought
So
that was a Baptist thing. That's what we did. We thought we were
Oh,
the only Christians. Who are these imposters?
oh.
yeah, that's a good point. Like when you were reading the intro, you said, "What's an acolyte?" I was in the Methodist Church for 7 years, and that's where I was an acolyte, someone who wears robes and carries the light onto the altar, lights the candle, snuffs it out, kind of like a
Altar
altar boy.
boy? Altar boy.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's a fair way of describing it. I'd ring the bell, for everyone to attend. Hear ye, hear ye. But before that, I spent 10 years in the Assemblies of God Church. Very different, very holy roller, very much like these people, creationists, etc. And we never particularly chose a label for ourselves. So if someone asked us what we were, and I attended a Baptist school as well, we would just say, "Oh, we're non-denominational," because we kind of took pride in not being so about religion, but being about our personal relationship with.
And also meaning you're not taking instructions from some top-down authority, right? When you say
Right. Yeah.
non-denominational.
Sola scriptura. Yeah. We're getting all of
Yeah.
our information from the Bible. And of course,
Yeah.
there's plenty of interpretations that are being passed along from pastors and Sunday school teachers, but we consider it, of course, just a straight reading of the Bible. Anyways, that's all to say. I could see that this was catering very much to a Christian audience. You don't see any mosque services or local synagogues or anything like that. So this is my view as I would stand at the edge of the hotel. I could see a lot of construction happening. They're building that hotel, and I see this road. And I was nearby, so I didn't have a rental car or anything. I would just in the morning walk down this roadway and enter through the entrance to the Ark. So once you get there, you see that the Ark hours are Monday through Saturday, 9 to 7, and then Sunday they open at 1 p.m. And you quickly realize, oh, that's because you're supposed to be in church before 1 on Sunday. So why would we have the Ark open? This is not a substitute for church. You still got to go. And as you enter the parking lot, which, by the way, in a follow-up episode, we interviewed Dan Phelps. He's a great guy to talk to about the Ark and the Ark encounter because he's been a thorn in Ken Ham's side for many years. And he has a lot more insight into the financials and kind of what they've done to work the tourism industry in Kansas and get a lot of taxpayer credits, a lot of sales tax returned to them and other various incentives. He's the one that told me that the revenue from the parking lot goes towards a company, a shell company that, for one thing, finances their corporate jet. Okay. So I got to skip past that and just walk. But as you can see, even from there, the Ark is far away, and you're seeing it from a distance. So you have to line up for a bus. But let's see, there we go. First like you would for any theme park, you line up and wait to get your tickets. And as you can see, well, it's a very small detail here, but for regular adults, it was $55 per ticket. I think the prices have gone up since then. That's just a regular one-day ticket. And there's various discounts if you're older or younger than that. But if you're 10 and under, it's free because, yes, they are trying to make.
Oh, you got
Sorry,
muted.
Ross.
You got
You
muted,
got
Ross.
muted for a second
Oh,
there.
how long was I muted then?
No, just a few
Just for a
seconds.
second.
Oh, okay, great.
Sorry about that.
So, so if you're 10 and under, it's free because, of course, that's the target audience. You want to get them while they're young. You want to encourage families to bring the kids and, dare I say, get indoctrinated. I think that's a fair
Do I
statement.
presume churches within a driving distance like bring the young kids here?
Oh, I'm sure there's field trips and buses that come. I'm sure that's all encouraged. And I would imagine they would offer group discounts. You can also get multi-day combo tickets or a ticket that will get you also into the Creation Museum, which, by the way, I also attended. But I won't even talk about that much today unless you ask me, because that's a whole separate story.
I'm
There's
just
so
curious. I always got the impression that they weren't very close to each other. Am I wrong about that? Are they within a reasonable trip from each other?
I wouldn't call it reasonable. It's a good 45-minute drive.
Okay.
And being out in Williamstown, Kentucky, that's where this is located. There was, and I didn't have like a rental car. I was able to get a ride out to sort of the sticks. I think even people in Kentucky would say, yeah, that's a little out of the beaten path. But getting a ride back ended up being nearly impossible, and I had to pay over $100 to a taxi driver to get me back. So if you have your own transportation, yeah, it's about 45 minutes away, the Creation Museum, closer to the Cincinnati airport. Okay, but because I'd signed up for the conference, it was $120. I did get free access to both of the parks. And I don't know if you saw, but in that picture, now you can see him kind of blown up on the left. They even have their own security there, kind of dressed up to look like CHP officers. And this always made me super uncomfortable because here they are wearing this, very official looking security outfit and having guns at their sides. But
are they guns? I was wondering if it was
yes,
tasers. They're guns.
well, you know what? I see a green tip to that one, so it might be like
I'm
something.
seeing both. It looks like I see a taser and
Yeah,
what could
Kara
possibly
actually
be.
has experience
Yeah.
in this sort of thing.
Thank you.
They are apparently carrying both
Uh,
handguns and tasers, which
Jeez.
is a bit disturbing.
Yeah, you can see one guy that has a holstered weapon of some sort on both sides of him. So, okay, thank you for that insight. But they're wearing little arm patches that say answers in Genesis. Just made me super uncomfortable seeing that rove around. And here's what they give you as a park map. So it gives you an aerial view where you're looking at an illustrated version of the ark itself. Of course, that's the main feature, but there's a big pond in front of it. And there's a lot of other things. There's a whole petting zoo that we won't really get into, the Ararat Ridge Zoo. Some of you may recognize the reference to the Ararat region that the
Ararat
said to have landed on. Yeah. And people are always trying to make efforts to say they found Noah's Ark in that region of Turkey, or that the government won't let them, or whatever the hand-waving excuse is. My mom still believed that the Ark had been found, and I had to disabuse her of that.
I think I remember seeing stories over many decades. They keep finding it.
Right. Yep. There's continual little documentaries. Anyways, I'll talk briefly about some of these other features, but of course we'll focus mainly on the Ark. So as I mentioned from the parking lot, the Ark is still far away. So once you've got your tickets, you then get on a bus. So I'm showing the side of a bus here, and they have these giraffes that they feature in a lot of commercials. And I think they even did one as a Super Bowl commercial. But people living in Kentucky will see them all the time because they'll run these CG animation, which is actually done pretty well. They'll have these little commercials where these giraffes entice you to come to this.
So written on the side of the bus says in big letters, "It's glorious, an adventure of biblical proportions." Not worrying about that. Basically, it's about genocide on the entire planet. It's glorious.
It's glorious. So when you first arrive, you could walk through the rainbow tunnel bridge. There's an archway that's painted in rainbow colors, and it's very much an Answers in Genesis pursuit to reclaim the rainbow. And you can imagine what it is that they feel is their contest with larger society about the rainbow. But of course, that is part of the Noah flood myth, is that God created the rainbow at that particular period. Somehow physics did not allow for it beforehand. But I was here for a conference, so I'm not going to just walk straight through the rainbow towards the park. I'm going to stop in the Answers Center, which you see to the right, in this kind of orangish yellow stucco building. So as you walk into the Answers Center, there's a lot of literature that you can buy, and you can see those cartoon giraffes. And a variety of other things you can buy. This won't be the only gift shop. There's quite a few. Most of the books are going to be by Ken Ham himself. And so here you can see a bunch of pre-signed books by Ken Ham. If you get 5 of them, it's only $60. Again, I hate to confess, but I bought 5 of his books because that's what I do. I read their stuff, I pour through it, I get all the details, and then I share it. So I've been reading the Ken Ham books. But you can see they have some other approved authors, Dr. Terry Mortensen, Dr. David Menton. So helps if you're white and a male. And you can also
one race, one blood jumps out at me.
Yes, that is a recent book. Yes, One Race, One Blood, a biblical answer to racism. Yeah, they kept making this point. They felt really proud of saying that, well, because God created us all and we're all descended from this family of 8 people, that we're all the same race. And I kept thinking, well, who's saying otherwise? What, who are you trying to make this point to? But they were very proud of themselves for that. Then you also had at this homeschooling conference, of course, you had a lot of makers of homeschooling textbooks who wanted to promote their books, their curriculum that you could buy, you could sample. So you see here master books. And one thing I could say is that there are very few approved vendors. Of course, Answers in Genesis is incredibly doctrinal. They have very strong positions on every little debatable point about the Bible and the Genesis story. And so if you are on the other side of that line in the sand, of course, you're not able to sell your books here. So also approved is Bob Jones University Press. And I had my creationism textbook, my geology textbook, I should say, in high school was from Bob Jones University Press. Downstairs, we have an addition to this homeschooling conference, a bunch of vendors. And so this is where you pick up your free tote bag with a bunch of literature, and people are giving you pamphlets for their various homeschool programs, forums for homeschoolers to get together and talk. You can see a guy here wearing a Second Amendment shirt with a skull and guns as the crossbones. You can also see a woman who looks like maybe she's Mennonite or, Amish, perhaps. That was well represented at the Ark. I would regularly go into the Ark and see groups of people who look to be Amish or Mennonite or something related.
I
Abeka
believe
Books.
there
Yeah,
are quite a few Mennonite communities in Kentucky, so that could be
yeah.
why.
And I later learned that a lot of the wood crafting on the Ark itself was done by Mennonites. Abeka Books was there. That's another one I was familiar with growing up. They didn't have as prominent of a display, but apparently they were, kosher enough by Answers in Genesis's, uh, uh, you know, rubric. And now I'm showing this very large conference room. So you had this is part of the Answer Center. You have this gigantic conference room with well over 1,000 seats that can accommodate the main lectures, the main presentations, and of course that first big talk to inaugurate the event is going to be given by Ken Ham. So he's an Australian expat who now lives in the United States. First started with the Institute for Creation Research when he came over here, but kind of I don't know, bumped heads with other people because he kept wanting to do things his own way. So he found that he could start up Answers in Genesis in Kentucky, and that it was fertile ground for him to expand. So you might say this particular brand of Christianity came from Australia, but it found fertile soil here in the US. So he started us all off asking questions like, can you marry your relative? And the answers you see here are, I see Kara covering her mouth in shock and horror. But the options are yes, no, probably, or only after counseling. And as we've already referenced, well, actually, I don't know if we have referenced this, but Adam and Eve, their kids had to procreate with somebody, right? There's a lot of incest going on in the Genesis account. Of course, the Noah story, you've got 8 individuals that the whole population, what a bottleneck, right? Think of the genetic problems we'd have if that were true. So he's asking us, can you marry your relative? And I was really surprised by the answer, which is just a flat out yes. And I was expecting him to bend over backwards and say, like, well, it used to be okay, and now our genetics are not as good, so you really shouldn't marry your relative. None of those disclaimers, just, yeah, totally fine.
Well,
Right.
I
And
love
so
how
he
he's
didn't.
used an extremely vague term, relative,
Yeah, yeah.
that could
Right. It's all
mean
relative.
anything from a parent or a sibling to your fourth cousin twice removed on
Right.
your dad's side.
That's why I was expecting the disclaimers, and he just, for whatever reason, didn't feel the need to offer them. Again, this is why I love being there, because I don't get his edited version later. I get Ken Ham straight from the tap. Then another question. I won't go through too many of these, but he asks, T-Rex was created to be A, herbivore, B, carnivore, C, omnivore, or D, all of the above, which is weird because omnivore would be all of the above, but okay.
Right. He doesn't know the definition of that word.
And the answer for you, 75% who were raised believing this is, oh, sorry, I didn't highlight the answer, but the answer is herbivore. The
Herbivore.
belief is that before the fall of man, there was no sin, or no sin and no death.
No death. I raised as a Catholic, I never heard that nonsense. And then I work with adults with PhDs, some of which who told me that for the first time, and they believed it. And I was like, oh, why do carnivores have sharp teeth? Oh, but they used to just eat plant. Like, what? And that they believe that. It's amazing.
Yep. They'd use those sharp teeth.
How about all the difference in the digestive system and the stomach and whatever? Well, I don't know about that. I never heard about that. It's just a teeth.
Yep. Those sharp teeth were for watermelons. So his presentation was about it's all about flattening worldview. So he just wants to say, you know what, we have a worldview and they have a worldview, and ours is better. And so it's not, science versus creationism. It's the secular worldview versus the Christian worldview. And it fascinated me that they had kind of rebranded the enemy, not specifically as atheism, though that word did occur and they talked about it, with kind of a boo and a hiss implied. But I thought it was interesting that they identified secular humanism as kind of their primary enemy. Just seemed an interesting flex on their part to kind of keep up with terminology.
And wouldn't they be including in that by default science? Because like science is the one who says why the teeth were sharp. Or
yes,
right. So it's not humanism which really would give that information. It would be scientists.
So you hit on a couple interesting points there, and one is that science has a positive understanding in society, and they think science is good, so they really want to reclaim that, and they're constantly trying to redefine science in a way that, like, you have your observational science and you have your historical science, and that's where a lot of scientists go off the beaten path, is when they're trying to tell us about things that they weren't there to see. So that they do what they can to defend science and say, oh, we're pro science, we love science, while of course rejecting a huge swath of what science tells us about the world. But another point that you kind of raised in your observation there is that secular humanism for them also includes things like they'll try to put Islam underneath that, and Scientology, and like they'll categorize the world.
Well, it's got the word science in Scientology, so therefore
yeah, you essentially have Ken Ham's approved version of Christianity, and you have things like Mormonism and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and everything else just gets kind of put under the world's worldview.
I'm right and everyone else is wrong.
Yeah. And for those of you familiar with the church experience, you're probably used to messages being provided in terms of alliteration. Here's the 3 P's to remember for, evangelism. So in this case, we had the 7 C's of history: corruption, catastrophe, confusion, Christ, crossed. Christ cross. There we go. I can talk. And consummation. Yes. Oh, and I forgot creation at the beginning. So, there was a lot of that going on. Little mnemonic devices. Of course, this is a homeschooling conference, so they want to give.
What is? I don't know what some of these things. What is this confusion? Oh, is that the Tower of Babel?
Yeah. Oh, very good. Yes.
Okay.
You're confused.
Consummation was the last one. What's
what's going on? Consummation will be Christ's return and the rapture. Yeah. And and then the final judgment, you can see the angry icon of Jesus on the horse destroying the world. Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't make that out. I see. Yes.
That's where we're all heading. And Ken Ham was identifying other problems like, people trying to blur the lines between gender, which for him, of course, has to be a strict binary. And on this slide, you can also see these 2 people, a woman and young Conan O'Brien, I guess, holding on to an anchor at sea, and they are trying to be protected by their boat, which is the Holy Bible upon which they stand. They're being protected from transgender, euthanasia, abortion, gay marriage, evolution, gender, infanticide, LGBTQ, infanticide, racism, polygamy, and male and female restrooms.
Wait, don't we have male and
Wait.
female restrooms? I don't
Yeah,
I'm
I don't think they
confused.
meant
What?
that. Yeah, I think they had a category error there.
Male and female restrooms.
That's
Okay.
what they want. Yeah, I think they got confused while they were making that slide. But these are the enemies. And we mentioned briefly at the beginning, I do work for Disney Animation. I live in California. And regularly during this presentation and others, and just conversations, people would throw so much shade at California as a state. So I'd hunker down a little bit in my seat. And also, Disney as a company is seen as being very woke, very progressive in a bad way for them. And so I would slink down in my seat even more because I'm wearing this name badge that says I'm from Burbank, California. So I won't spend too much more time on the homeschooling aspect, but just to give you an idea of the kind of things that were covered. They would also have, again, they're very pro-science. So you see these two people wearing lab coats and giving like a demonstration of chemicals that produce fire and fun stuff like that. All fine. They're fine with the kind of science that you can just memorize and rattle off, and things that don't conflict with their worldview. A-okay, they love it, including
So what was
Yeah.
on the screen there was high. Could you go back? High
Yeah.
heat capacity keeps the Earth temperate. Were they? Is this something against anthropogenic global warming?
They weren't making that point in this particular talk, but that will come up later for sure on the arc
Okay.
itself. But in this case, they were just talking. It was kind of a series of arguments about how the Earth is perfectly made by God, of course, for us, and there were aspects of water that help keep the temperature even over the planet and make it a habitable zone for us. Also, I took a class on hair microscopy, and it was to show us that hair demonstrates that God had to create us separately from the animals because you can tell human hair apart from animal hair. And go into that in way more depth on the podcast. It was fun them trying to find one little sliver of science that supported their point and kind of failing miserably.
Wow. So
Yeah.
if we were to compare two other animals and note that their fur was different,
Mhm.
would that mean the
Exactly.
same
I was thinking of
thing?
that too.
I'm
Yeah.
confused.
Well, it just shows that because there are so many ways to show by comparative anatomy that our bodies came from evolutionary antecedents. But they want to fixate on this one little aspect that they can say, well, look, these are entirely different. It looks like God created them separately, separate creations, independent acts. And funny enough, like, for example, in that presentation, someone asked, hey, can you tell the difference between a man's hair and a woman's hair? No. Interesting. And yet you have such binaries about men and women. Huh. Okay. Uh,
Hmm.
and yeah, I attended many other courses. I forgot how many slides I actually did include of this. Don't worry, we'll get to the arc soon. But I would have a class on teaching your children about science, and it would start with things like, well, look what science can't answer. And that's fine. Yeah, there are areas of life that science can answer. It isn't intended to, but they really try to lean hard on that.
So one of the things on this slide is broadcast. Science can't answer broadcast. What the hell does that mean?
Science can't tell you what you should share with other people, what's important. Yeah, that was a very poor way to represent it on that slide. Another slide saying science has limitations. And so the end of this Forbes article that they've quoted says, that's why everything we do in science, no matter how well it gets tested, is always preliminary. That's actually a strength of science. But of course, they're trying to compare and contrast and say, scripture gives us all of these certainties, whereas science is just full of doubts. Well, that's a good thing, right? But they're trying to paint it as a bad one. There was a lot of presenting of, certain figures within science or atheism. And so here they have Dawkins, and they played a little clip of his just to demonstrate, aha, see, he's trying to be an evangelist. He admits it's a religious pursuit. He believes in science as a religion. Because again, they want to just flatten all of these things. So it's not science versus anti-science or pseudoscience. It's just, my worldview versus your worldview. So anything they can do to demonstrate the science is just a worldview. And other aspects of the homeschooling conference, they would have like the armor of God from Ephesians 6 that you could come and try on as a kid, take a photo in your armor of God. and the aforementioned Busy Mom's Guide to Romance. I went to that and I got kicked out because I was the only man there. And yeah, this well-meaning guy from the ministry who sounded a lot like Mike Pence. He pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I think they'd be able to have a better conversation." You could tell it was awkward for him to kick me out, and I said, "That's okay, I'll leave." But it was just kind of funny. More about that again on the longer form podcast series. Okay, but let's exit the answer center and let's look at the ark. So it's a lovely thing, and here it is under a clouded sky. And like I say, 510 feet long. And all of this has to do with, cubits, and that's a whole discussion. But there's scant information in the actual biblical text about this whole story. Very little to go on. So whatever they do have, of course, they home in on. And one of those is the dimensions in cubits. And you know what? We'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'll leave it. But suffice it to say, this is a big boat. It is impressive to look at, and construction looks pretty good. But the way you're supposed to enter is on the right-hand side. And you'll see these topiary animals. We got some elephants or some camels down the line. They're all walking towards the ark. So you're supposed to walk down that right-hand side. And as you go, there are these steles, these relief sculptures about different stories in the Bible leading up to the ark story. So it's just a quick recap. Previously in Genesis, in case you missed it, you get to see the whole fall story and all of that. And, they're nice illustrations. They're well done. And you see, the snake and all of that stuff. But as you arrive at the ark, here it is, standing kind of right under the ark entrance. Yeah, this thing is massive. It is truly an impressive edifice. Moving to the other side of it, if you look at it from the prow, and there's been a lot of confusion over which side is the front and the back of the boat. But again, it's quite imposing. And this was just fun. I was out there eating lunch once and I saw Ken Ham walk by. That's him kind of towards the front of that procession, walking with a bunch of youth. I ran in to follow them, but I guess they must have turned a corner or gotten in an elevator or something, and I didn't see them again. But he does walk around his own attraction. There's many photo opportunities. So this is a picture of me with the male cast of the Ark encounter. So Noah and his three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. You might all remember from that homeschooling or early education. So this is me in front of the prow. But there were various cutouts where you could stick your head through and take the photo like, "Hey, I'm Japheth. Isn't this exciting?" All right, here is the rarely seen backside of water. Oh, sorry, Disney took over. The backside of the ark. So this is why, as Rob was saying, this thing would not float because it is moored to this giant cement structure. And this contains the elevators. It contains the restrooms. That's right, there's restrooms on the ark. I got to go to the bathroom on Noah's Ark, a rare honor in my life. And various administrative offices and other things. So yeah, it is not a real boat or barge. They don't like it being called a boat, but it's not a real floating structure. Many of you may have heard the news article headlines when the Ark Encounter filed for flood insurance, which is, of course, delicious irony. But turns out that
Oh my goodness.
that wasn't related to flooding inside the Ark itself. It was very nearby off to the other side. There was some landscaping
property.
Yeah, they had removed too many trees and it had allowed land.
In my limited remembrance of this from Catholic school, I thought there was one window in the ark. I'm seeing on that little side just two on the side there. What's going on?
Oh, let's go back. So you can see from here there is the one door. That is the only entrance. So there weren't small entrances for the chipmunks and large ones for the elephants. There was one door to the ark, and later on in the slideshow, I'll show you the other side of it. So that is an important point for them. There also could be windows up above, and the Bible does kind of describe that a little bit without much definition. So yeah, there are slats above where air can come in or select rainwater.
So the other thing is for people who can't see this, the ramp is a fairly steep incline that goes up to essentially the middle of the boat where the one entranceway is. And
Yes.
yeah, I could see that when they were supposedly loading the boat, when Noah was in there and guiding all the animals to the right places. But what happens when it lands and it's a random place and there's no ramp and they have to fall 40 feet to the ground? How'd that work out?
It's an excellent question. Yeah, I'm sure that's funny. I haven't thought to ask that one, but instantly my mind, because you know what, like literalists, creationists, they're not necessarily dumb people. They just, they've used their intellect for this purpose. So my mind can instantly go into kind of the mode that they would, and they would say, okay, well, they probably had rope ladders ready because they knew that this would happen, and then
Lower the elephants on rope.
and then they would go and the humans would build a ramp and then everybody could get out. It's a
I
great
see.
it's a great question though. It absolutely is. But I know, and instantly they would come up with a theory that
Some
is
apologetic, yeah.
apologetics. Yeah,
Or
apologetics.
God can do anything.
Or God can do it right.
God just snapped his fingers and all the animal. Well, actually, why let them all down on Mount Ararat when the koalas have to crawl all the way to Australia? So you probably just have to snap your fingers and put them all
It's a
back.
good point. And I gotta say, they did their level best to try to provide answers. It's called Answers in Genesis, and they will give you answers. They're not necessarily good answers, though, but they are answers. And only on rare occasion would they just outright completely make it an act of God, a miracle.
So seriously, that thing about getting the animals all back in the right place, penguins back in Antarctica and the New World animals, what is their answer for that? If it's not magic?
That is one of the magic answers, as is how the animals got there in the first place. They just say, oh, God summoned them and they followed God's command and they came where they needed to be. They believe that there was a supercontinent before the flood and that afterwards
but that doesn't work going back because the planet's been drowned and there's no food to eat. There's no other animals to eat. The koalas don't have eucalyptus trees all the way back to Australia. So that doesn't work. It has to be a different answer for the...
Rob, you're trying to make it make sense.
I'm sorry. I'm too freaking skeptical.
And you're asking me to wear that hat again, and I can because they were in the ark for a long time as things dried. They were actually in the ark for a year. So there was time for plant life to start regrowing. They have answers for these things. There's answers in Genesis, but generally they do want to hand wave and have you not pay attention to that. So as you can see under the ark, as you come in from the appropriate entrance side, they've built this long queue and you can see all these empty metal corrals that you could walk through because they're hoping there's going to be these Disneyland-like crowds. And, sometimes I would see a fair amount of people, but other times I'd walk through and this place was just empty. And I had it to myself, which I kind of enjoyed. But it was just funny to see these long queues that are of no use to anybody because you can walk right in up the ramps, lots of wood construction. And you can see they've organized it into 3 main decks. And the Bible does describe that. There were supposed to be 3 levels. Little known, there is a 4th deck up top. I really wish I could have gotten up there. The elevator doesn't go there for the public. Apparently there's like a dining area up there and storage, and they'll take VIPs up there. So I would gladly go back if they would give me access to the 4th deck. But I'll be walking you through and showing you the main features. And then there's a ground level with the gift shop. You got to have the gift shop there. So as you walk up onto that first floor, you come in the doors and there's kind of these cross sections of what the hull of the boat would look like. So you can see on the other side, there's a slightly different approach to it, but they show you kind of woodworking methods that they feel, along with the pitch described in the Bible, but not represented here, that you could create a watertight structure that would float. And yeah, the pitch is missing, as is, of course, the gopher wood, which is not a real type of wood. That's just a placeholder term in the Bible. So they give you little displays about what wood they think was used. And they have this display here where they talk about the artistic license that they had to use, which I approve as a punster, wordplay guy myself, that they had just that much sense of humor that they could occasionally say something like that. And they would freely admit, yes, this is not not a replica of exactly what the Ark would be, because we've added all of these ramps and displays and stuff, but we're going to give you little sections of it. And yeah, we had to make things up, like the names of Noah's wife and the names of the wives of the sons, because it's the Bible. Why would you give women names? That's not important. So they were laying some of that out front. You walk through a lot of these crates, and you can see there's crates where they would keep the animals. They've used bamboo. They've used a few different other wood types. But I think importantly here, they've kept all of these slats really close together so you can't see inside, because they can't make that many animals for this display. Anyways, these are just kind of demonstrating that you could have a lot of smaller animals closely packed together with these little jars of clay that are feeding them water. A lot of that. And they've got this lovely warm illumination going on with, of course, electric lights, but the idea is that you could have done this with oil lamps. Another fun fact about the Ark is that you have the family represented on every floor. So here, all 8 of them are together, and there's kind of this chanting sound as they're praying to God. It was a little creepy though, because it's, non-English, and it's just this kind of guttural chanting that they're praying to God, and they've come up with this Noah's Prayer that they share. But once you get past that, now, it's time to start looking at some of these animals and trying to address some of these pesky questions that you skeptics ask about how all of this worked. So,
oh yes, how did freshwater fish survive? That has always been one of my questions.
Yeah. So they've got, again, answers in Genesis about this. So in this case, they say, well, anything that lives in the sea for the most part would have been fine. They could have survived. We're talking about cataclysmic movements of water. How's the cave fish supposed to survive all this? But whatever. They're saying that aquatic animals, again, for the most part, maybe if there's special exceptions, they could have a few water tanks on the Ark, but they got to stay outside because they could survive and not get the population bottleneck of 2 individuals. Of course, another big question is, what do we do with all the giant animals? And they show all of these brachiosaurs. How do they get in there? Well, we only needed these 2 juveniles, so fine, problem solved. Wipe your hands.
This is one of the areas
Wait a minute.
Yeah,
they were on there for a year.
Yeah.
So didn't they grow?
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
This is a problem. I'm saying they have answers. I'm not saying they have good answers.
So I had another question on that one.
Okay.
So, I when I learned about Noah's Ark, I don't think I ever took it seriously, but still, there were no dinosaurs mentioned. So is this Ken Ham's idea that there were dinosaurs on the Ark? And by the way, why aren't there dinosaurs after the Ark landed? What the hell happened? Did the tigers eat them? What happened?
Let me just say that will be addressed. So let's keep moving. Okay. Another big debate for the biblical literalists is, was it 7 of the clean animals and the birds, or was it 14? Because there's ambiguity in the text. So these are the kinds of things that they get to the bottom of, or admit maybe they're not sure, but they're trying to allow for the number that would work. How many animals could Noah or did Noah have to bring to fit on the Ark? So they worked it out that they needed to house fewer than 34,000 individual animals to fulfill the requirements. And we'll get into a little bit more of the detail of kind of their system of reckoning. But we have another information display here, and this one was very interesting to me, that there are 1,398 animal kinds. So this is a very specific number that they've worked out. And kinds, as you may notice, is not the word species. It's not the word family or genus or any of these other scientific classifications. It's their own thing, of course, borrowed from the Hebrew word used to describe animals in this context. So each according to its kind. So yes, Answers in Genesis allows for a certain amount of evolution to happen, but of course they won't use that word if they don't have to. But they allow that animals could change and diversify after the Ark, just not too much. And all within the space of, they feel that this happened like 2,000 years into the Earth's history. So, 1/3 of the Earth's history was before this event, and 2/3 after. So very short amount of time for evolution to happen as anybody understands it. So a lot of hand waving here, but
So they don't believe in evolution because it takes billions of years, but they believe in hyper evolution since the Ark landed. I actually saw
Yeah.
calculation done sometimes. It would be like five species popping into existence
Yeah.
every minute on Earth since the Ark landed. I mean,
Yeah,
like it's
that
insane.
that claim does not bear scrutiny whatsoever, but they're fine with it as long as it's not one type of animal becoming another kind of animal. Oh, and here they've shrunk it down even more, where we could get away with essentially 6,744 individual animals on the Ark. And again, they're saying, of course, this attraction is the Ark encounter. It's not the Ark itself, but they have built a scale model, 1 to 48 scale of the Ark, and how they kind of picture it having been packed and what it would have really looked like if you were on it. All right, but to your question of, are there dinosaurs on the Ark? Yes, that's right. They want, at least they're not saying that dinosaurs are just put in the ground to fool us from Satan. They're saying dinosaurs are real, but for whatever reason, I think it would have been convenient just to have them killed off in the pre-flood era.
Sure, that makes sense. I don't
Yeah,
get it why
that
you put them on the Ark and now they're
be
anonymous.
nice and tidy, but maybe they thought that seemed a little too vindictive of Yahweh to kill off the dinosaurs. Now, these are non-mammalian synapsids, so they would have that little talking point. And you've got these bony guys, and you've got these kind of crocodilian ancestors. But I think the important point here is that, kids visiting will see these reproductions, which are high quality. I gotta say, hats off to the team that made these animal reproductions. They look great. But when kids later on see these textbooks with creatures that died off, millions of years ago, they'll say, "Oh, I saw that over at the Ark," and millions of years. That's absurd. I can't even count that high. So here you have like these pteranodons and pterodactyls or related kind of bird-like creatures. Here we go, our first real dinosaurs, the stegosaur kind, quote unquote. And there would be heavy borrowing from, here's a couple spinosaurs, got to have two of those. So there would be a lot of generous borrowing from scientific cladistics of animal grouping, but whenever they would need to step in to kind of clean things up, they would, and under the terminology of kinds. They'd worked out their own term, baraminology, to study kinds. That's not a real thing. That's not a scientific pursuit,
Oh.
but they'd say it like it was.
So how about the giant sauropods? I didn't see any of those yet.
I don't think they actually did represent that. And of course, they would just have representative animals. So they didn't have one model of all the 1,398 kinds. They were just giving enough displays to make points, and they would use the signage to kind of make the point that they wanted to. So yeah, I don't think I saw those. Here you have on this second floor, you have a lot of the family members engaged in feeding the animals or doing chores around the Ark. So here you have the one black person out of the 8 who is supposed to be responsible for a whole diversity of human population thereafter. Here we have some kind of duck-billed dinosaurs. You know what? There we go. That's kind of more like the
Yeah, there we go. That's a
yeah,
sauropod.
that's what you're looking for.
So are any of these animatronic, by the way, like as in Disney-esque, or are they just all fixed in place?
Not the animals. There is one animatronic. Well, yeah, there's one like highly moving animatronic, and we will encounter that one later. But most of these are still very well made, but yeah, not moving. Here's our Tyrannosaurus Rex, again, juveniles. And yeah, let's hope that they stunt their growth for that 1 year. Maybe supernaturally keeps them young. We have very short-necked giraffes, which is funny because the topiary leading into the Ark were long-necked giraffes. And the giraffes, of course, in the commercials are all long-necked. But this was to, again, give the point on the signage that, what, it's okay. Yeah, we agree that okapis and giraffes are related in the same family tree. That we're fine with that, but we'll give them short necks here to allow for our limited amount of evolution. Again, not using that term to get the two.
What did they do for primates?
Yeah, you know what? Primates are included, but in a separate little aside on a different exhibit. Yeah, I think gorillas and close human relatives are always awkward. They didn't have them in the cages here, but they did have one aside to make little points about how Lucy is misinterpreted as a fossil and all of that. This one was fun for me because they wanted to answer the obnoxious skeptics who say, "Oh, were there unicorns on the Ark?" Because the King James Bible mentions unicorns 9 times. So they say, no, that was a mistranslation. It was actually referring to rhinoceroses or perhaps something
So you
else.
said King James Version. That's interesting. Has it been changed in the newer versions, the newer updates of the Bible?
Yes, I think the New King James Version has changed them
What
from
do
unicorns to some other accepted substitute,
ah.
one-horned creatures or what have you. Well, to move on, and again, uh, I could talk about all this for many, many hours. I'll try to keep moving here. So let's move up the ramp to the second floor. And here we're kind of guided into this retelling of the creation story. So you see the 7 days of creation, beautifully illustrated. Again, the level of artistry is quite impressive in this place. And so imagine the perfect world. You see the Garden of Eden with the, tastefully covered, naked Adam and Eve wandering amongst the dinosaurs. They really want to habituate you to this Flintstones image of humans living alongside dinosaurs. So, all is great. We've got perfect humanity, perfect authority, perfect world. But then comes the fall. Man's rebellion corrupts creation. So it's kind of this like almost graphic novel like presentation of the Genesis story. We see the first sacrifice and Adam and Eve needing clothing because they realize they are naked. We see the first murder as Cain kills Abel, that whole dispute over the sacrifices to Yahweh. And of course, we know God loves nothing more than the smell of burnt meat. For whatever reason, he's God. I don't know why he cares about that, but that's
I
important.
noticed Abel is wearing very, very sophisticated clothing. I wonder what factory made that.
Yeah, and artists, artists here on the call may notice that the shadows are all completely wrong here and sort of go against the storytelling with the way the light is coming. Abel would totally have seen Cain coming up behind him, but let's not quibble too much. Then you have this is the big inciting incident, the ultimate lie that started everything. The serpent saying to the woman, "You will not surely die." And there were a lot of people riding scooters like this here at the Ark as well. So we had our 7 days of creation. So they've created like a parallel of our descent into darkness as humans do all these horrible things. And again, they've kind of confused categories. You have civilization, polygamy, music. What's wrong with music? Metalworking, giants, violence. So again, it's a scant tale. There's very little information in Genesis. So they're doing what they can to paint a picture. And here is where they want us to lose all sympathy with all the people who got killed. They want us to see that this world was just so irredeemably corrupted. So they have this whole tableau of this scene happening in sort of a gladiator pit. And so you have this like one guy who's driving a spear into the heart of this woman. Very dramatic. And again, nice artistry, but they've created these little statues, and you've got these people who are just thrilled at the bloodlust from the side. And here's these guys screaming, but wait a second, is that a Carnotaurus in the background? Why, yes, it is. So inside the arena, there is a Carnotaur coming out to attack them because, again, humans and dinosaurs lived alongside each other.
With nicely decorated, looks like gold horns on its head.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of, that's right. These were owned by the king. In fact, there's a whole novelization behind this. They've created this whole backstory to Noah in his early life, which is a 3-part trilogy. I'm almost done with the third book. Again, I read their stuff. Sorry. Well, but so I can tell you about it. But here we go. Here's the whole tableau where you can see this little arena scene with believers thrown in to be eaten by the dinosaurs to the cheering crowd. Then we come on to this next tableau. And again, they want to show us just how wicked and wanton these people were. And they had to ride the line between how do we show sexual immorality without scandalizing these Christian families, having it be family safe. So they work very hard, but you have people dancing and skimpily clothed, and you have look at this. There's some kind of throuple going on here, and is that a man looking lustfully on another man? And they're mixed race. Oh, none of this is good. This is bad. They should be destroyed. Oh, the worst of all, a man playing out of 2 flutes at once. So general revelry. We have another
there too.
Get part of the whole backstory is that there's this snake god that they're all worshiping. So you see people sacrificing things to the snake god, and this involves a little side entrance where women are going presumably to have abortions. I can say that. yeah, all of this is so bad. And there's this mural after you see all that says the pre-flood world was exceedingly wicked and deserved to be judged. Does our sin-filled world deserve any less? Whew. Well, I hope so.
Wow,
I don't
that
notice any young children or babies in these crowds.
Yeah, they don't want you to be thinking about that. You know, there are some kids in the waves there. But yeah, they want you just to be thinking, oh yeah, humanity deserved to be wiped off the map. But yeah, there's always going to be kids around. The kids don't have a right to decide. So you get one display where you have here on the second floor one of the wives dutifully sweeping, and she's asking all these questions to herself. Is God cruel? Why is death the punishment for sin? Why does a loving God allow so much death and suffering? Was it just for God to judge the whole world? And as you can see, they've tidily answered these questions within a few paragraphs worth on a wall display. But you know, I think they realize it's a problem and they have their tidy little answers. But mostly, it's just don't think about it too hard. There's some films here. The Noah interview is pretty fun. They give us a dramatization of this guy playing Noah and you know, him trying to build this ark with all these scoffers coming to make fun of him. And as you can see, there's his wife, which they've named Emzara. It is a name that comes from tradition, but it's not biblical. And she says, "Well, scoffer's gonna scoff."
Oh my God, Taylor Swift-esque.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, very much so. So here you can see kind of the audience for one of these film screenings sitting on the wooden benches. And then also on the second floor, you've got some of the family engaged in their various tasks. So here's one of the hottie, and I mean hottie, Hottie. You know, he's got his pecs showing. You know, he's working on his woodworking and various other displays that, yeah, always it's strange, like the homoeroticism that you find in Christian work. Here's our animatronic that we were talking about. So this is Noah himself. And so he's sitting there at his workbench. And by the way, he's writing this text on the paper in front of him. We'll come back to that. But there's a selection of 14 questions that you can ask Noah on a touch screen. And if you ask him, like, how many animals are on the ark? Animatronic Noah will tell you the answer. And again, I got to say, the artistry, the work done is pretty good. You know, it doesn't feel like a second-rate presentation. They spent a lot of money on this. Yeah, I don't know if you ever answered the question from the intro, how much money was spent on the ark?
Yeah, I saw
oh
some
yeah.
guesses.
Let me pull up the poll questions and
Okay.
let's see, we had, let me see what the responses were on that one. By the way, 88% of people have never been to the Ark Encounter or any other creation museum, so thank you for going for us.
There you
so
go.
we don't have to. And let's see, our answer choices for how much did it cost to build the Ark Encounter Museum. 18% of people selected about $1 million. 46% of people selected about 10 million. 14% of people selected 75 million, and 22% of people selected more than 100 million. So, what is the answer?
It's more than 100 million, which isn't too surprising for me, you know, thinking in terms of like film budgets and stuff. But yeah, modern construction costs and all of these displays, even though I'm sure Ken Ham did his darndest to get deals on everything and use volunteer labor where he could, yeah, it cost over $100 million to build this American monument to misinformation.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, and by the way, you were going to tell us what Disney animated film the
Oh,
Ark was featured in.
That's right. That was the other implied quiz. So y'all got it right in the chat, and I know there was a lot of discussion between Fantasia and Fantasia 2000. The original Fantasia was 1940 and was released in 1940. And Walt had said at the time that he wanted to have additional installments in the future. And so actually Fantasia 2000 came out in 1999, and it included a dramatization of the pomp and circumstance music that we all associate with our graduation ceremonies. And that had the animals coming on the ark, and Donald was Noah's assistant. And of course, Daisy, his girlfriend, was there. So there you go. Fantasia 2000 was the correct answer.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, so I don't think, did I miss it? Did you read the poll question number one, Kara?
Hmm. Sorry, I did not. And that was, were you taught that the story of Noah's Ark literally happened? And as Ross mentioned earlier, 75% of
Wow.
people here tonight said yes. 13% said no, and I feel vindicated. 11% of people are not sure. So
There we go.
legitimate answer choice.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, but y'all are my people here. So regularly throughout the exhibit, you would see these written, codices, and it turns out it's just an English to, this. They've made up this kind of character system, and it's just English, and it's written from right to left. So once you figure that out, as I did, I decrypted it back at home. I could go through all of my photos of all the written things on the ark and find out most of them were just little comments like, "Hey, watch out for these guys, they bite." And sometimes it would be little passages of scripture. So you see Noah preserving his story, for a later.
So was there a Rosetta Stone? How did you figure out that that was actually a thing even to figure out?
Oh, I took it upon myself to, well, work my way backwards from there. There were some displays where they would have an English title and then a subtitle, so I was able to get some of the letters that way. But
Okay.
then beyond that, I just kind of decoded it. A little bit of cryptography was fun. So I have the answer key. All right. So then we head up to the third floor, and it's Ken Ham. It's a cardboard cutout of him, but there's a little display about how you can help support all of this and give money to the ministry and the history of the ministry. And behind him, you see a Pepsi machine there. It was a nice thing where if you bought this plastic cup, and they had different designs. So I bought one with a big rainbow next to the ark. You could get free refills from all the soda fountains at the facility for the rest of your stay. And I captured what I think is the most American photo I have ever captured, which was this robust gentleman wearing an American flag shirt and a cowboy hat and his jeans and buying a Pepsi on the ark. It seemed very American to me. All right. So yeah, they give you all the history of answers in Genesis and bringing this program to life. The Creation Museum as well, which was created a decade before this. But now we're again on the third floor, so it's time to enter the family quarters. So you can see, I think this is Shem reading. All of them have like these little descriptions and the things that they were specialists in, these trades and skills that they're going to pass on to new generations to preserve knowledge of the past. So yeah, this very I don't know, pretty hot Shem there. Oh, nice. Might give people on the ark some lustful thoughts. And then you have Japheth and his wife, and he's a musician. That's great. And then you have Ham and his wife, which again is our one black person, which is accounting for, how did they get Asian people? I don't know. They have worked it out, actually. There's a display on that later on. And Noah and his wife are engaged in the famous story of releasing the doves to go find out whether it's dry or not. There's other passages that say ravens, but we won't get into that whole rewriting of the whole story, textual analysis. That's fun, though. Anyways, then they've got another film upstairs where they used all the same actors from the film on the second floor, but now it's in modern times. And so they have the guy who is playing Noah. Now he's like just a docent working at the Ark who's answering this reporter's questions and trying to give her the salvation message, which comes from, Banana Man himself, Ray Comfort. I'm sure you've all seen like that viral video of him saying that the banana is the atheist's worst nightmare because look how it perfectly fits in the hand. And
With Kirk Cameron.
with Kirk Cameron, that's right. Both of them are good friends of the Ark encounter. So here he is in holographic form for some reason, giving the gospel message. So after you've watched that film, then you emerge onto this is, I think, going to be of real interest to all of you here. Look at the flood. Well, look at various kind of science answers, quote unquote. So here we have what about the flood? What happened outside of the ark? And so they have these kind of answers about how the Pangea, or actually they believe was it Rodinia, that it broke up into Pangea, which only existed for like 2 weeks during the flood, and then that landmass kept moving. So they felt under the waters there was all this shifting happening that created our modern continents. And then they give all of these examples that I remember from my creationist textbooks of like, here's how the Grand Canyon could have been all formed in one event instead of millions of years. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So they have all of this horrible geology info, but really that is where creationism started, was with flood geology. That was like the name of a book that really caught on in like the 60s. All of this like really literalism where we try to back it up with science is all a relatively recent thing that kind of started in the 60s. Here they talk about their vision of how the ice ages played down after the flood. And so you've got people looking at, for example, this guy's looking at this display that tells you why climate change is not the thing that the media is trying to make you think it is. There's no global warming. It's just, there's always been warming cycles and it's just a natural thing. We'll all be okay. It has nothing to do with human activity. That's right. They have multiple forms of pseudoscience here.
How did they
And
get these numbers?
oh goodness. Well, they're bad numbers. Let's just say that. But I think libertarian think tanks is where they get these numbers. Very selective slices of progressive trends over time, and then they'll either exaggerate or just selectively present certain numbers to try to make their point that yeah, like for example, the whole medieval warming period thing, that was exclusive to the European continent. When you look at it overall, there wasn't a warming trend, nothing like what they're presenting here for that time on a
Oh
planet-wide
boy.
scale.
Wow.
Yeah, lots of monkeying with science. And it's very a strange experience as you're walking through these hallways to hear Bill Nye's very familiar voice. Inside of this polar exhibit, you have Bill Nye from, many of you may be aware of this, a popular debate, I think it was in 2013 or thereabouts, that he had with Ken Ham. Something that, can be debated whether it's useful or productive to have debates like this. But whether you think it is or isn't, Bill Nye did a very good job of countering a lot of these talking points.
So Ross, Bill Nye was at SciCon where we were both at, and which is
Yeah.
where I asked you to join us today. And I asked Bill Nye the question about that debate. A lot of people, including me at the time, didn't think it was a good idea. And he said, well, I don't regret it because I cannot tell you the number of people over the decade who've come to me and said, I watched your debate and it was the thing that changed my mind.
Fantastic. I'm in favor of it. I do understand, though, there are marks in the con category where people like Ken Ham will start so many of his, current blog posts with like, when I was debating Bill Nye, to make it sound like they're legitimate. But, I'm actually with you. I'm glad that Bill Nye did it. He did a good job. But Ken Ham wanted to get in an extra word in edgewise on this one particular debate about ice layers. So he plays the Bill Nye clip and then he plays his additional explanation that he gives later that he wish he had said in the moment. Then you have a display about Babel, and they show you the construction of Babel and the confusion of the languages. They believe that was all literal too. So here's the construction of that, which if you give them more money, eventually they're going to build a life-size Babel.
No.
No.
That's part of the plan. Here's a little bit of their reasoning about how these different groups came to be from 8 individuals, how you could get all of life's diversity or all of humanity's diversity of skin tones.
And so quickly, so freaking quickly.
So freaking quickly. Indeed. Of course, none of it bears any scrutiny, but it's here. They've provided their answers. They also have an exhibit on ancient man. They want to make it clear that humans were just as smart back then and probably had all these advanced technologies that they just kind of forgot. So they've sort of backdated a lot of invention to before this flood, which doesn't fit anywhere in a rational timeline anyway. And then you have your flood legends. So there's a special exhibit about all of the other flood stories around the world. And of course, they'll allow that as a boost to their talking point that, everybody's talking about it around the world. So see, it was a global flood and everybody else just has a corrupted version of it. Of course, ours is the correct one. And to that point, they've taken some of the other boats described, for example, in the much older Epic of Gilgamesh. They've said, well, okay, this is technically a larger boat, but it would be a very uncomfortable ride. So they've given little ratings to all of these different boat designs described in other ancient texts. And obviously, the Noah story is a corruption of the original Epic of Gilgamesh, but they've done their work here to make it, that the Bible version is much better and more rational. To that point, we were talking about the Disney presentation. They have this whole display on what they really hate, which is the fairy tale arc. So here they have all the little cartoonish animals, and they can't stand that. They can't stand it when they see the little picture books that show the big giraffe neck sticking outside of a tiny ark that's only the size of 5 giraffes, because they feel that that cheapens the historicity of this important moment. And so here they've put this, what I think is kind of a fun display of all these rainbows and arcs, as this is very dangerous. And that's why they're against Veggie Tales. That's why they don't mention Disney here, but they're against these cartoonish depictions because, as this sign says with the snake wrapped around it, if I can convince you that the flood was not real, then I can convince you that heaven and hell are not real.
I mean, they're not completely wrong about that. When I went to college and found out all that stuff we learned in Abeka books wasn't real, it was kind of a chink in the armor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I gave this was kind of cool side story. I won't get into it too much, but I was able to give a presentation at my Presbyterian church, where I was at before and after I left the faith. And they let me talk about evolution and why Christians should accept evolution, because if you teach your kids anti-science, when they learn the real science, they're going to ask what else you lied about to them, And that was my pathway, or that was a big part of my pathway out.
Well,
Oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead. I interviewed Bailey Harris at SciCon years ago. She's a very, I was the youngest
Yeah.
speaker at SciCon ever. She was 13 at the time, I think. And I interviewed her, and she did a video, a look at the Ark. And I just want to put that in the chat for people, because she actually has a picture of kissing that snake in
Yeah.
in that picture.
Fantastic. I love it. So then they have an exhibit from the Museum of the Bible. They're in DC. They have the larger Museum of the Bible there. Lots of backwards dealing in their funding. That's a different story. But here you can see reproductions of famous scripts and then some, I think genuinely interesting biblical displays. I happen to be still like a Bible nut and read a lot about the Bible. Let's chat later. But anyways, that's just an extra thing that fit up on the 3rd floor. And then, of course, the real reason we're here, we already did get the salvation message from Ray Comfort, but I mean, that's why this whole thing has been built, right? It's to win people to Jesus, and the ark is just a means to that end. So they have this whole section on the prow of the boat where you walk through this comic book, because that's what the kids are going to like, where you have these kids. One's a believer, one's an atheist, and one's undecided, and you see them kind of have this back and forth conversation. Meanwhile, they put in these little displays to give you other little arguments in favor of Christianity. Like this video that plays on loop about how there's so much textual manuscript evidence for Christianity. There's so many copies, and they go so far back compared to all these other things that we don't question, like Caesar and others. I won't evaluate that because that would take too long, but we do on the podcast. Also, other little things like casting doubt about radiocarbon dating by pointing out, times that radiocarbon dating was used where it shouldn't be, or was used, improperly. Of course, the reason that is because science did it again and did it better. You learn about bad science from good science. So whatever. Anyways, this is a salvation message. So they lead you down Romans Road. They've got the John 3:16, for God so loved the world, all of those things that we've heard ad nauseum. And we talked about the door. So this is the inside of that door. So this is actually down on the 2nd floor, a little out of sequence. But they make a big point because they have these books talking about the salvation message, and how there was only one door that you could get into the ark from and be saved. In the same way, God has used other doors throughout history to signal salvation. And so Christ is the final door. And you can see that not so subtle cross of light hovering above my head as I stand in front of these giant doors.
Oh, I did not notice that. It's a
Yeah,
cross.
yeah. When you're there, it is still subtle, but you can see it even better than in the photo. Um, oh, I could tell you some interesting things about this tour guide, but I won't get too distracted. But here you have this whole display about whether we can trust the Bible. And of course, the answer is yes, but it talks about fulfilled prophecy and all of those things. And of course, this got my attention for a long time. The true history of the world. There is a massive timeline, a big chart that was created. I won't give you the backstory, but there's this chart of the whole Earth's history, and they've worked to like take all of the events of history, Attila the Hun, and the Tower of Babel, but also the creation of the pyramids and all these things that we know happened, and try to align them in the 6,000-year history. And they sell copies of it, which thankfully Carrie bought me a copy. It wouldn't fit in my luggage, so I couldn't buy one. But I
Did you
did
talk about this in one of your episodes?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I would
And
like to listen to that one.
I've got to listen to the pyramid one. I would love to know
Yeah.
how they account for the pyramids being built over a period of time that begins before the time the flood was supposed to
And before
happen
there were
and
any
goes
Jews, because this is
continuously
before the
until
Abrahamic
afterwards.
religions. Yeah.
Yeah. Like beer was invented before the creation of the world, but they've got their own alternative way of lining these items up. This is just a view of multiple decks. Occasionally, you get a vantage point where you can just sort of see multiple layers of the ark. And again, it's an impressive structure, nicely done. And as you might expect, you exit through the gift shop. And so down on the lower ground level, there's food you can buy and candy and all kinds of interesting things, books, puzzles, cups, mugs, various books, keychains, replicas of the ark. And I was very tempted by all this. Thankfully, I was constrained by the size and the remaining space in my luggage. Here you can see me with Noah's cubit. Thankfully, a listener went back for me and bought a Noah's cubit and sent it to me, so I now have that. Longer than my own cubit. I can't fit it on the Zoom screen. Anyways, they put a lot of thought into cubits and which ones they use. So again, extra details we go into in the podcast. They have a whole VR display, which again, well done. I'm a big VR enthusiast, and I got to say the virtual reality was well done, where you actually get to go in a time machine and they take you back in time and you see the flood happen and on the water and the whole thing play through. It's
Did they have all the drowning people on the outside?
No, you didn't see that so much. Yeah, they didn't show people like squealing and banging on the. Did they show people banging on the doors? I'm not sure that they. You know what? Yeah, because they showed scoffers. I think there may have been some banging on the door. And then there were other aspects of this conference. Again, Kirk Cameron was a big draw, and he does show up on this final day of the conference, as you can see with his giant American flag up on the screen, and people singing the national anthem. There's a lot of jingoism going on, a lot of nationalism. They were trying to get us all to join this American Campfire Revival, where you could study the Constitution and learn firearm handling. Like that's why is that related? But yeah,
biblical.
Yeah, it was so macho male. Yeah, it was great. And Ken Ham is promoting the statue made by not by the Pilgrims, but in honor of the Pilgrims. He had a bunch of replicas of it made, so he was really excited about the statue. But also, we had this outside concert where there was singing, but also a very strong anti-abortion message. That was one of their rallying cries. So we would get preached to, we would sing, and you can see everybody kind of worshiping alongside each other with their hands outstretched. And feels just like my old church days. I'm back again. This is just a good representation. Occasionally you'd again see these very American things. Here's a guy wearing a camouflage shirt that says, or a camouflage hat that says Jesus on the back, and then a shirt that says, "My faith and my freedom are one. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Psalm 33. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. That was my that was my trip to the Ark. And as I mentioned, they've only built a very small portion of what the grand vision is for this Ark park. So if their attendance hasn't been what they promised, their money hasn't been what they promised, but if they can somehow, by hook or crook, get more, eventually we should expect whole different lands with the Babel structure and an amphitheater and all these additional features. So there you have it. That was my trip to the Ark, and of course, a lot of it was painful and head smacking. But I'm the kind of person who also, as my shirt says, found this humorous. So there we go. That's my
Love
trip
it.
to the Ark.
I
Thank you
love
so
it.
much.
And
Wow.
I'm glad that you went so that we don't have to, and we don't have to give them any more money. That was great. Really interesting. Do you want to let us know, before we go to some questions, where people can find you and listen to some of your other podcast episodes?
Yeah, ohnopodcast.com or maximumfun.org. We are part of the Maximum Fun family, so you can find our podcasts in both of those locations, or if you search for Oh No, Ross and Carrie, anywhere podcasts are freely given away, that's where you can find that. And we do have bonus content for people who support us. We're really appreciative of our audience who does support us and help us pay for all these crazy adventures, sometimes out of state or even out of country.
You
Uh,
have so many good ideas and episodes that I didn't know what to ask you to do. But one of the other ones we were talking about was the time that you infiltrated Scientology and were eventually thrown out because they figured out who you and Carrie were.
Yeah, I am still on their rogues gallery list, which means that they are trained. Anybody who works at the front desk or in security at Scientology is trained to recognize my face and Carrie's face and turn us away. And occasionally, like the velociraptors in Jurassic Park, I'll test the perimeter just to see if it still works. Uh, Last year, I went back with a full beard. I'm working on my Noah beard here. They would stop. They would look at their phones, look at me. There'll be like this little moment of dawning realization, moment of panic, and then they pull up their phone and they do this thing, and then they like as I was starting to walk into the building, one of them said, "Hi, Ross," and I said, "Hello," and I kept walking. And they're like, "No, you can't come in here." And anyways, it's yeah.
So they must have regular like study sessions and quizzes so they can memorize these people.
Yeah, I don't know how long the enemy list is, but I'm on it. Yeah,
Wow,
I'm not
that's pretty impressive.
I'm not one to make enemies, but if you gotta upset a bear, that's a good one to upset.
I love that so much. Okay, we've got a few questions. We should probably get to a couple of those, and then we'll go to the hangout. I think we'll have a lot more. This was so much fun. I'm so glad you shared all this with us.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Okay, let's see. We've got to start us off with, speaking of infiltrating places where you get onto the enemy list, someone is wondering, to avoid detection during your infiltration of the Ark encounter, how many times did you have to respond with an amen or God is good or praise Jesus or anything like that to try and blend in?
That's a really good point. No, none at all. I used my real name and paid with my real credit card and, walked around advertising that I was from Burbank, California. And sometimes I would get a intake of air. But I there were no like tests of faith. I think there is a certain assumption that most people who are going to come there and be paying participants are already of the fold. And that's where Carrie and I are unusual because we're there, we're going to have a good time, but not for the reason you expected. And of course, we want to be open-minded. Going into this, of course, I knew a lot more about creationism. I have that background, so don't think I'd be as open-minded as I would with other investigations. But to that point, when we'd be around the campfire and singing songs, I'll sing the songs with you. Why not? I won't lift my hands in prayer or praise, and I won't shout amen or anything. But I'll be there and participate. And I'm not there to create trouble in the moment.
So in connection to that, let me tell you what I asked Bailey Harris that question, and she wasn't as careful as you were. She said I messed up a couple of times, so by the time I got it right, talking, she was recording video and she was saying things that apparently were obviously that she wasn't a believer, right? She said 2 security guards came up to us and we were able to talk them into letting us stay in the Ark, but it was pretty scary. So apparently, if you go too far, they will throw you out.
I did make a friend on the Ark, one of the guys who was just kind of standing around guiding traffic, and so we started texting each other and everything. And he became helpful later because I could ask him some questions because he was on the staff and he would send me in.
Nice.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when Bailey told me that, I wasn't picturing the guards as having firearms. So now it's even worse.
No kidding.
Holy
Well, and
crap.
when I was getting a tour from one of the guys who was responsible for all the signage in the Ark, it was really fun. And he's actually depicted many times in the Ark, and he's the author of that little book series I was telling you about. Fascinating character. Um, I was asking a ton of questions. I was kind of dominating the conversation as one of this group of 20 plus people, and every time I could get in a question, I would. And at the end, I asked him something about, how they respond to skepticism on a certain
Mm.
point. He said, well, people like you and me, we understand that blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, oh, how nice that even with my, I think, provoking questions, but kindly worded questions, he still kind of saw me as a fellow traveler. And that was kind of cool.
That's good.
Cool.
I know how to
Well,
blend in with Christians.
years of practice.
Yeah.
So we had another question. I don't know if you actually got to figure out the denomination of people that were your fellow tourists there, but somebody asked, did you get a lot of people from the Catholic Church there?
Oh, good question. Not that would have been identified to me in any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't imagine that it would be too popular with Catholics, because for most Catholics, I don't think evolution is seen as that big of a problem or the metaphorical interpretation of the flood myth. So I wouldn't expect so, but I didn't have anything to go on to
So
tell
I
me.
went to a play a month ago. So it's a touring play, and it's a one-person stand-up comedy routine, and it's catechism. It's like late night catechism. They have Christmas catechism, and it's a nun talking to everyone in the audience as if you're the students, right? And about the Catholic catechism. And she asked questions, and then one question she asked just before the intermission was, who, when Cain killed Abel, I have that right? Cain killed Abel. Yeah. Who did he marry? And so I'll answer for the answer when we come back from intermission. So then hands got raised, and well, there was another creation in another district, and there were women there. Or she goes, no, stupid, evolution.
Yeah.
And this is a nun saying that. So she says, we believe in evolution. We're not stupid.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Good for her. I'm always for, yeah, I get it. Like, we have in some ways more in common with the fundamentalists in that we feel like everything has to be consistent. And so, like apologists, of course, apologetics means never having to say you're sorry. But like, in apologetics, you work your way backwards from the conclusion to the answer. But, they have to have everything feel consistent for them. And you have these, theists who do what I can't really do, which is just say, yeah, I'll just sort of keep those in separate compartments of my mind. And I don't have to think about why God just sort of sat there staring at single cellular life for like, 3+ billion years before he finally got the creatures to worship him that he wanted. But like, I would much rather religionists accept the science and then do whatever mental math they need to do to make it all work than rejecting the science. So good for that nun.
Well, not a real nun. This is, to be clear, this is a play.
Good for the fake
an
nun.
actress. But I think she was very knowledgeable because I did go to Catholic school for 12 years. So she didn't say anything that contradicted what I had heard so many decades ago. So that was, yeah, Catholics are on board with evolution and, an ancient universe and all of that. At least, they finally came to that conclusion after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years late, but at least they came to the party.
And it's a good party. Science is fun. Okay. Speaking of fun, you mentioned, Ross, that the Ark Park is perhaps not generating as much revenue as they had hoped. So someone is wondering, do you think that they've collected as much revenue total as Disneyland takes in a typical day?
Oh, that's funny. Off the top of my head, I'm not ready to answer that one, but it might be a close call, and especially across the parks. Forget about it. Not even close. That's funny.
I love it. I would kind of want to know, but they may not be sharing that information exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I could go crunch on that in the background, but yeah, I don't know off the top of my head like how long it takes the Disney parks to generate what the Ark would in a year, but certainly not a year.
Interesting.
All
All
right,
right,
next
let's see.
question
We got
was,
time for a
is
couple
the
more.
Ark accessible to people in wheelchairs? It doesn't look like it is, although I did see people in scooters in your photo.
There are ramps and there are elevators. So yeah, it is. And there were a lot of people in scooters and yeah, wheelchairs. So it is ADA compliant. I would venture so.
Okay, well, let's see. I think we've got time for one more, so I'll skip down to the end. This is a good one to wrap up on, I think. And don't forget, we have the hangout after this, so if we didn't get to your question, I apologize. Stick around and you can still ask it. Someone is wondering, how did you get interested in doing the podcast and this work? You seem to invest so much time and energy in it.
Yeah, it is my second full-time job. And I at the time I was still relatively fresh out of leaving the faith, and I was listening to a lot of other skeptical podcasts, and I wanted to contribute. I wanted to find some way to share skeptical look at the world, but didn't really have a format for it. And when I met Carrie, the inciting incident was we were both attending the Center for Inquiry's book club, and we'd see each other at lectures. And we were two of the few young people. And at one point, so we were already sort of friends, but not close friends. But she had asked the group if they wanted to go see this Kabbalah presentation, and everybody else was like, no, why would we? We don't believe that kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, yeah, totally. So we went, we experienced the Kabbalah lecture about astrology. Next time we came back to the book club, everybody said, like, well, tell us what happened. What was it like? And we're like, what? You didn't want to come with us, but you want to hear us talk about it? And that dominated the conversation for most of the meeting. And both of us kind of had that light bulb moment afterwards, like, we have something. And I think early on, what kind of justified it for me was that we were doing, I think, a few things that felt new enough to justify making the podcast. One is that we were doing the firsthand investigations and focusing on that. Secondly, we were having fun with it. I'd say it's almost as much a comedy podcast as it is like a factual podcast. Like you'll learn, but you won't even realize you're learning. But then thirdly, we wanted to be nice about it. We feel like a lot of skeptical media, like a lot of people turn away from it because they feel it's maybe mean-spirited. And, sometimes people will say that we're being mean-spirited, but for the most part, I think people see that we do truly not want to have fun at the expense of anybody who's well-meaning. When you're a perpetrator of miseducation, or you're taking people's money, then you're fair game, as the Scientologists would say.
Seems fair to me, as a potential trouble source myself.
And for those who want to know more details about the podcast and how Ross became a skeptic and got involved in all this, I interviewed him in 2021, and I just put the link in the chat. And for people listening this on the video, you can search, oh no, it's Ross Blocher Part 2, which has a link to Part 1 also.
Excellent. And I guess that's a good note to wrap up on. Rob, do you want to tell us what's coming up next on RfRx?
What is coming up next? Something very interesting, I am sure. And
Yes,
I have
indeed.
lost my connection. So if you are on it,
That's
you can
okay.
please read
I
it.
will carry on. Yeah, so next week we're back again, same time, same channel. We're going to have Seth Andrews talking about Christian purity culture. And later this month, we're also going to have Dr. Ben talking about separation of church and hospital.
That
And
used to be
then
student Dr. Ben, correct? Yeah,
yes,
it's
and now it
Dr.
is
Ben.
Dr. Ben, who is taking time to come and meet with us despite a very busy schedule being a doctor. And we're also going to have our celebratory holiday episode with Sarah St. Abaddon, celebrating Yule with Satan and Krampus. And then, of course, we will, as always, take a short 2-week break on what will be the Monday of Christmas and New Year's. So those will be our last 3 episodes this year, and then we'll start fresh again in 2024. And if you want to catch up in those weeks on your RfRx episodes that you may have missed, don't forget to check us out on our YouTube channel, and you can watch previous episodes there, or you can listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have any questions, comments, ideas for future shows, anything like that, you can email us at rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. Don't forget to check out our blog and our podcast. And follow, like, and subscribe on all of the social medias. We are on Facebook. We have both a Facebook main page as well as a Facebook support group page. We have an X account as well as Instagram and TikTok. So if you are on any of those, and again, it's Recovering from Religion, or RfR, on all of those, and I dropped the links in the chat. So find us on whatever platform you're on and give us a like or a follow and share with anyone you would like. If you are comfortable doing that, it helps us reach more people who might benefit from recovering from religion. And with that all said, let me go ahead and launch our feedback poll before we bring on Dr. Darrel Ray to close us out for the evening and start the hangout. So before you go, it helps us out if you take a moment to answer our exit poll. It is the same as it always is. The first, and again, these are anonymous, but they help us find out how you liked it, how you found us, and so on. So the first statement is, this program was relevant to me. Answer choices are on a scale of 1 through 5, with 1 being not at all relevant and 5 being very much relevant. Number 2 is, the speaker was clear and understandable. Same answer choices, 1 being not at all understandable. As we say, banana phone, could not understand a thing. All the way up through 5, very understandable. It was like I was there in the same room with him. And number 3, I will definitely attend future programs like this. Same answer choices, 1 through 5, 1 being definitely will not attend again. I don't even know why I'm still here. I waited all this time just to select 1 on this poll. All the way up through 5, will definitely attend again. And finally, how did you find RfRx tonight? Was it through the RfR online community or Slack channel? Was it through a meetup event? Was it through Facebook, X, or Instagram? Through Discord, or on the RfR website? And I will leave that up while Dr. Ray wraps us up. Dr. Ray, welcome.
Hey, Russ, thanks. I have been listening to you and Carrie for a decade. When did you say you started?
I think it was 2011.
Yeah, 2011, March 2011.
2011. Okay, well, you are like the great. Now, I have not listened to every episode by a long shot, but I probably listen once a month or every couple months, and consistently. I always enjoy what you guys do, and what blows my mind is how much damn work you put into making it funny and entertaining and educational. How do you do your day job? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes when one or the other requires more than more than half of my time.
But I'm serious. You are the great granddaddy of, or great grandparents of. I mean, how many podcasts have gone even 2 or 3 years, let alone, 12 years? In fact, we are older than you, but not by much. We started in 2009. In fact, our 14th anniversary, our 15th year is in April. So we'll be celebrating our 15th anniversary. But anyway, that's, I was amazed. I didn't realize how long I'd been listening to you. Anyway, so I'm just going to say this. I don't have anything else to add, Ross. I'm going to say this. If you can walk through the Ark encounter without losing your mind or having your brain explode or getting into huge arguments or any of that stuff, then you have already, and I'll just take my president of the board's privilege here and say you have already qualified to be an Ark Recovering from Religion volunteer.
Well, thank you. Fantastic.
I don't think, wouldn't you agree with me, Rob?
Absolutely.
I could not do that. I would. That's why I haven't gone. But anyway,
yeah, I mean, the other episodes Ross does too. There's several podcasters who do this sort of thing, but Ross and Kerry do excellently. I think another one is Michael Marshall, who does Be Reasonable and interviews people live. which have when I listen to, I want to stick an ice pick in my ear so I don't hear this anymore, and just so polite to the people he's interviewing with the most outlandish, crazy, dangerous ideas. And yeah, Ross and Carrie don't generally. Sometimes you do interviews, but generally it's you're experiencing these things. And I would just go crazy. I went to a local fringe group once where everyone around me was talking about secret space programs and portals to Mars, and I just couldn't take it. I could not take it that these people really are around me and they believe this. And you do it all the time.
I will ask one small favor of you, Ross. Do not investigate recovering from religion. Just don't put us on your radar, because we're secretly a cult here. So
it's a long running joke that the soul skepticism thing is just a really long undercover investigation. I mean, that is how I got into it, though, like, because I found out about these science lectures that were happening at Caltech. This was the Skeptics Society back in the day. And I went there with kind of my arms folded and my answers from the Bible. But I was really interested in the people who disagreed with me. And guess what? They won me over. And so now I continue to go and hopefully keep an open mind. But so far, haven't been won over again.
So much for the argument that I do hear from a lot of people, that you can't win somebody over with rational arguments if they've been convinced otherwise.
Yeah, there are. I mean, it's a good rule of thumb, but there are exceptions, of course.
All right. Well, that's all I got. Kara, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ray. And thank you again, Ross, as well as Rob and all of our other volunteers who make this possible. We have Gail and Glinda, troll stomping and moderating, Nikki streaming us onto the Discord, and Helen and Jason moderating and helping out with the Hangout, as well as all of our other volunteers that help with the promotion and the pre-production and post-production and everything else that goes into this. So thank you again to everybody.